to City and State TV. I'm Morgan Pehme here with my friend and colleague Gerson Borrero at the 2014 City and State SOMOS Hub. We are joined now by State Senator Gustavo Rivera. State Senator, thank you so much for joining us.
Like, you got the fancy Spanish pronunciation.
That's right. A nice one. I'm a Ponceño now.
But by the way, before you do, these are tea bags. This is not drink tea.
And Carmen Yulin told me earlier today that I'm an honorary San Juanero, so I mean, like,
you belong to two different towns in the island.
Exactly.
Ponce, this is the way the Ponce people are. Ponce say Ponce.
Ponce y lo demás
and the rest
es parking.
Is parking space.
He's got the script.
Look at that. I'm busting out Spanish like left and right. That's all I know how to say, though, and other than curse words.
I only speak Spanish to the left.
Okay.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Well, so Gerson's to your right. I don't know what you're going to say.
Let me get to the nitty-gritty here. Estamos aquí in the SOMOS Fall 2014 conference. You have been part of the process from the outside way before you became a state senator.
Yes, sir.
You became a state senator taking on not an easy fight, which was taking on a very popular, or thought to be popular, Pedro Espada. Look at that. Pedro Espada.
Is that what his name was?
No,
I've forgotten his
no.
name.
Well, you might have forgotten, but he has some history there, and so you took on Pedro Espada, but you took him on. I remember the details, and correct me if I'm wrong. After you had explored as a person from the outside who knew the workings of government, you took him on. After talking to 17 people who you wanted to run, was it about that?
It was. So the short version of this story is that as an operative, before I was in the Senate, I worked in the Democratic Conference in the Senate, and a lot of the work that I did was to find candidates to run their campaigns, etc. So I knew about government, but I also knew about campaigns, and so I put a list together as soon as the coup in 2009 happened. I knew that I had to do something to make sure this guy went away. And so I put a list together of who I thought would be potential candidates, and 17 people were on it. I was not in it. As a lot of people know, I resisted running for a very long time. And ultimately, it became obvious to me that this guy needed to be defeated. That was obvious to me from the get-go, but that it needed to be me, because the people that were running were good people, but they did not have the ability to be able to beat this guy, and he needed to go. So I became a candidate. And as I tell people, I'm exactly where I need to be. The last 4 years have been incredibly rewarding.
No regrets?
Challenging. Not really, no.
Let me ask you, before we jump into do you think we need a Pedro Espada within the circumstance? Well, wait a minute. Wait.
Am I going to let you finish that question, really?
Well, no. Well, you...
Finish the question, I'm sorry.
Okay, so I'm asking the questions. How are you going to let me finish the question?
Go ahead.
But Pedro Espada did bring some attention to, whether you like it or not, in the manner he did it, to the issues, or some of the issues that had to do with Puerto Ricans and Latinos. You may disagree, but the fact that...
I'm going to let you finish.
But
I'm going to be a Kanye. I'm going to let you finish.
Okay, there you go. So is there an element, maybe not at Pedro Espada, are we lacking that kind of confrontational kind of government put in your face that, hey, we're Puerto Rican, we're part of this? I mean, there was the amigos that actually, Ruben Diaz is still standing, the state senator. You don't have Hiram Montserrat there. I understand the people, and neither is Carl Kruger as the senator.
Yeah.
But there was something different about. There was chaos and all of that, but I think there was some attention brought to some of the issues that are not being addressed by this current governor.
But that's not what Pedro Espada did.
Oh, okay.
He didn't bring up issues because he thought that they were important. He brought issues because he thought that it brought him.
Okay.
That people thought positively with him. When you think about, he was the chair of the housing committee. He made himself chair of the housing committee in this exchange that happened back then in that mess.
The deal.
Yes. Well, there were various deals, but one of them ultimately made him the chair of the housing committee, not because he cared about people's housing. I live in a rent-stabilized apartment to this day. Right? He didn't even live in the Bronx. He lived up in Westchester somewhere in a nice little home.
Mamaroneck.
There you go. And he brought a lot of sushi over there.
Right.
So, and he talked about farm workers not because he cared about exploited labor. He talked about it because he thought it would be a good little talking point. So ultimately, it is definitely, there's something about the message, but we're talking about the messenger as well. If somebody is going to talk about something because they want to be self-serving, because it makes them feel like they're going to get positive attention, I don't think that moves our policies forward at all. And matter of fact, when you have somebody like Espada, one of the things that the gallon for me that overflowed the cup, it wasn't una gota, it wasn't a drop, it was a gallon, was when he walked around the state. And you remember this, talking about how he was the highest ranking Latino in the state, as if we should be proud of him, as if we should be proud of what he did. And ultimately what he did was he shook down everybody to be able to be at a better position for himself and the little crew, the little crew around him. That does not serve our community well. That does not serve the state well. And I do not believe that we need anything like him ever again.
But deals still go down. Deals are going down all the time.
It's not about the deals.
Okay.
It's not about the, obviously.
So
governing requires for people to come to agreements on things that they might not. I'm not going to get 1,000%, 100% of what I want. If I'm sitting down with you, or you're a legislator, I'm a legislator. We might not get 100% of what we want.
Aren't you sugarcoating this? Because the governor right now cut a deal for a women's equality party because he wanted to get even with the Working Families Party, which is really a political.
That wasn't a deal. He created the WP.
It wasn't a deal.
He created it.
But
he made a deal with the WFP.
He
did not make a deal to create the WE.
Right. When you're talking about the deal, like the Women's Equality Party was something he created. He didn't reach a deal with anybody.
Right, but it was because based on a political whim of his that he wanted a certain way for the Working Families Party to deal with him, and he couldn't get it, so he cut a deal. So maybe it was because Espada was doing not the kind of deal that you're comfortable with, but really, what's different?
Again, it's not about the deal. It's about, there's always going to be negotiations in politics. There's always going to be negotiations in government. We're always going to be able to we always have to get to something that we're both happy enough with, that we can vote for, and that we can
compromise.
Push forward. We have to compromise. Governing requires that. That is not what Espada did. So to compare his self-serving aggrandizement with anything that we might be doing today to fight for the issues that we care about, I think is honestly insulting. Like I don't want to accuse you of insulting us. I know that you're being.
Well, I've done it before, so it doesn't matter.
Right.
No,
provocative.
No, but let me jump in here because
Please.
I don't think that Gerson is trying to defend the criminality that State Senator Espada engaged in, and went to prison precisely because of the bad things that he did, right? But maybe that Gerson's talking about the need to have a provocateur, right? That there's this kind of this herd mentality among elected officials. Okay, we have to compromise, we have to respect authority, or if we say this, it's going to cause this conflagration. We're never going to be able to achieve our aims. But isn't there a need for someone who's going to go in there and just kick some ass, cause trouble, and shake things up? And where is that person in the state legislature right now?
You certainly like the format, don't you? Because you can say stuff like that.
Sure.
It has nothing to do with the format. I say that at home, I'll say that on TV.
So I will tell you this. I do not disagree with the idea that a lot of us in the last couple of years have not been as assertive as we need to be on the issues that we care about. I'm not going to deny that. After the Tuesday debacle, bloodbath, whatever you want to call it, we have to ask some tough questions of ourselves, both as a party and as a conference, about what happened, what didn't happen. There's some national trends, there's some statewide trends, and there's some things that we probably need to do better. And I'm not going to deny that many of us should have been, in many instances, more assertive on issues that we care about. We have to reassess that, and in the coming years, it's not even the coming years, it's like we have to figure this out in the next couple of months, because come January, we're going to have a Republican majority that I believe is going to push back in very serious ways on the issues that we care about all over the place, whether it's healthcare, whether it's education, whether it's housing, all of these things, precisely because they would want to position themselves to be able to survive 2 years from now. We know, certainly we did not expect, I don't think any of us expected the turnout drop on Tuesday and the impact that it was going to have. There's many of us that expected to come down here to have a conversation about how do we craft together a majority to be able to govern in January. That's obviously not the conversation that we're having. So as part of all of the soul searching that we need to do, as individual legislators, as a conference, as a party, that is certainly one of them.
You're very capable and shrewd political operative in addition to being an elected official. I don't mean that in a disparaging way at all. You really know the nuts and bolts of politics.
Thank you.
And earlier we were talking with State Senator Mike Gianaris, and he was saying that Rob Astorino practically got the same number of votes as Carl Palladino, but we had a 1 million vote drop off from the last midterm election, which means those 1 million votes came out of your hide. So what were the Democrats doing wrong that 1 million New Yorkers left and said, I would rather stay home than cast my ballot for you?
That's part of the questions that we got to ask.
That's what I'm asking you.
Why no? But
because
it's Saturday,
but
brother.
I feel like you're the one most likely to be able to answer that.
It's Saturday.
Yeah.
This is, first of all, my first reaction was, what are the 5 stages, right?
Yeah.
First stage is denial, right? Then anger.
Yeah.
Then negotiation. then depression, and finally acceptance.
And then
right?
the sixth one is that we say it's a Republican wave.
That's it.
But hold on. I want to answer this. I think that it is too soon right now for me to tell you exactly what happened.
Okay.
I can go into the numbers and we can analyze it, but again, we need to sit down as a conference. We haven't had an opportunity to really do that, and we need to ask ourselves really tough questions. We haven't done that yet. I will answer the question when I have one. I have a better answer for you.
That's fair.
I think because, and I'm drinking tea. This is not that we're see the tea. I just want to make sure that as we're streaming live from the convention center or the Condado Plaza, the hub for City and State TV, we're clear, and so is the senator doing the same.
Yes.
One of the things that I want to make sure before we move on, that at no point, and I'm not defending Pedro Espada, but he was not convicted or is in jail for anything he did in the legislature that actually he was convicted for. It was through his clinic. So let's be clear that it was okay, the deals he cut and they weren't illegal. It was because of his thievery at Soundview Health Center. So we're clear on that. Okay, so now we move on. There is, because you were on the streets, you've been on the streets, you've organized for other politicians, including you worked for many elected officials, you worked on the Barack Obama campaign, so you know what's out on the street. Do you need any better analyzing that the people in your own district, and if you talk to, they'll tell you what the discontent is within your own party, the Democratic Party, why they're not enthused, why they're not excited about the way this governor is running New York State?
But that's certainly the beginning. I represent 318,000 people in the Bronx, and considering that not only Espada but his two predecessors both went to jail.
That being Efrain
Gonzalez and Israel Ruiz, like three people that were in my district before me went to jail. So I take the responsibility of representing these 318,000 people very seriously.
Right.
And part of that is certainly listening to them and what are their concerns, what are the challenges that they face every day, and what do I need to do as a policymaker to address those concerns.
Right.
So part of the conversation is asking them why they didn't come out. But again, I don't have the exact numbers of what it was in my district. I know that a million statewide. And in some of the contested, because I'll be more honest with you, I was paying a lot more attention to how I could be helpful to the people both that were Democrats like Cece, Ted, and Terry, Cece Katchik, Ted O'Brien, and Terry Gibson, who were solid Democrats and solid good people who lost on Tuesday.
Right.
I was paying attention to them, and I was paying attention to Justin Wagner, who was in a competitive race in the Hudson Valley. So you start with your constituency, but then you kind of back away and you start looking at what the overall strategy was as a conference. What was the overall strategy as a state? And listen, nobody from the governor on down should be proud of ultimately what the turnout was. It is bad news when we have a state that's supposed to be solidly Democratic and we get, I believe, an average of 30% drop off in turnout across the state. That is not a good thing. And there might be national trends that we certainly need to take stock of. But there's things that we need to do in the state much better as Democrats to define ourselves, what our values and principles are, and how those values and principles connect with people all over the state. So we need to do that. But again, all this stuff, it's 3 days, since that happened.
Senator, I appreciate and I find it refreshing that you're not going to talk about something just shooting from the hip without some empirical evidence to back it up, and I think that's honest and true. One of the things that we did an exclusive interview last night with Senate Majority Co-Leader Jeff Klein, and he was saying that he thinks that the Democrats, the regular Democrats like yourself, went astray by not emphasizing the record of progressive accomplishments that you had, the SAFE Act, the raising the minimum wage, the positive things that you were able to accomplish. And he said that instead the Democrats' campaign strategy revolved around emphasizing the things that were not accomplished and hammering away at the Republicans for failing to do those things. And he said that the people were, to not mischaracterize him, but that the people did not respond to that type of negativity. What do you think about that read on the election?
First of all, I don't necessarily agree that was what the strategies were in all those different races. Granted, I don't live in any of these districts, so I didn't get the 1,000 pieces of mail and 1,000 things on the TV and the radio, or all the knocks and calls and what have you. So I think that part of it is that is part of the conversation. We need to ask ourselves what we did as a strategy. I'm not going to poo-poo it. I'm going to say he's completely wrong. He might have a point. But if we don't talk about the drop in turnout, tremendously high drop in turnout, if we don't talk about the obscene amount of money that was dropped into races. I mean, I believe that Justin Wagner's race, ultimately when you look at it, will be a $7 million race. That is insanity. It's a state Senate seat, $7 million. So when you have, somebody coming in at the end and saying, I'm gonna drop 500 grand. On Monday before election day, I had a problem with my car. I took it to a local shop. The guy says it'll take about 15, 20 minutes to fix. Why don't you sit down? I'm sitting down. I'm watching Wayne Brady, Let's Make a Deal on ABC in the Bronx, and comes up an ad for Justin Wagner. I'm sitting in the Bronx. Somebody saw an ad in Jersey about CeCe Katchik or Ted O'Brien. Like that only happens when you, like, a deluge of money. So if we don't talk about those things, we will ask, as I said again, we will ask ourselves the tough questions about what we did as a conference that we need to do differently. What is the messaging that we did that didn't connect? But if we don't talk about the drop in turnout, lack of energy overall in the Democratic ticket, and we don't talk about the money, the obscene amount of money that came in from outside sources, then we're missing the point.
Yeah, and obviously both sides had millions of dollars in IEs,
It wasn't the same, dude. It wasn't the same. When you match it up and you'll see that if we were here, and I'm glad that we were here, but they were there. Like when you get revenue that drops in $1 million, which is or $5 million, which is a drop in the bucket from what they potentially stand to lose if we really reform rent control laws. It's like, and we spent $1 million or $2 million. It's like the money difference was humongous.
Well, actually, I wasn't going to talk about so much of the arms race side of it, and that's
right.
A fair point that you're saying. I was talking about the messaging standpoint,
okay.
right? As an experienced campaign operative, I mean, that you're trying to cultivate a message, you're trying to portray your candidate or yourself in a certain light, but now IEs come into the equation, and you don't have any control over how people want to portray the race, and they might very well have the money to drown out what both candidates are trying to say about themselves.
Yes.
How does that transform the equation when you're talking about campaign craft and the considerations that you have to have in the new election universe?
Now that's something that somebody needs to write a couple of books about, because that
Professor, that's your chance.
I don't write, dude. But the reason I'm in this and I'm not a full-time professor is because it took the writing and the researching was not something that I was willing to do.
But Governor Cuomo wrote a
I love
book.
teaching.
Yeah.
That's great. I'm not a governor, so what are you talking about?
let's-
But just to answer the question, it is an essential question to ask overall, both from a political science perspective, from a politics perspective, from a day-to-day governing perspective. You are right. It changes the calculation. Like if I'm figuring out how many doors I have to knock, how many people do I have to talk to, what kind of people do I need to put on the street to be able to do that? What numbers are we hitting every day? What kind of positive feedback are we getting back? Those are the metrics that I use. If somebody drops in $500,000, $1 million, and my full budget is $250K, it's like it changes the whole. So that's something that's going to change. That's changing nationally, and not for the positive, not in a good way.
Well, we're on the subject. The leader of your party,
Yep.
sitting governor, head of the New York State Democratic Party, was sitting on at least $35 million that he had his war chest. He said he endorsed certain senators were in jeopardy. He went out and campaigned for them, but he did very little actually in active campaigning. Do you think that the governor miscalculated in not actually doing a few debates with Xavier Teachout first in the primary, and then with Rob Astorino having a one-on-one so that he can then tell the full story? I mean, he felt safe, but was it a miscalculation on his part in saying, we're in deep trouble? You were concerned, you mentioned 4 that you were concerned about. Does that mean that there's a disconnect that you in the Bronx could understand this and Governor Cuomo couldn't understand it sitting on the second floor on 3rd Avenue? I'm not trying to get on. I'm just saying, what is it? There's a disconnect from the reality that you see. And, the governor has a full picture as the state chairman of the Democratic Party. And somehow he felt comfortable and say, okay, I can sit back and, not speak about my record and the accomplishments that we've had as Democrats. Did it hurt you?
I will say this. Why decisions were made, strategic and tactical in that campaign, the way that they were made, that's something you got to ask them. But I can tell you that
he won't sit down. He won't sit down for an interview.
But that's not my job.
That.
But what I'll say is the following: it is truly unfortunate that the results of the campaigns that we all waged was that we had 1 million less people voting. It's like everybody's got to ask themselves tough questions about that. If we want an active electorate, if we want an active democracy, we need to make sure, we need to change the way. You were asking Andre yesterday about things that we need to do in the electoral process to make it more accessible for people. I could not possibly agree more. We need to have same-day registration. We need to have early voting. We need to make it easier, more people to have access to the ballot. Because the fact is, both from a democracy perspective, it is better when more people vote. And I'm not going to lie to you, from a political perspective, when Democrats win, when more people vote, Democrats win. It's a golden rule. So for both of those things, I don't know why the decisions were made. I certainly, if I would have been in the room, I would have advocated for something different. You got to ask them why they made those decisions. But I think that the unfortunate reality of those decisions, as well as the ones that we did at the campaign level, whether it was individual candidates or us as a conference, the ultimate result was that we had drops in turnout that were record-setting all statewide, and it's sad, and we got to ask ourselves questions about it.
You know, Senator, and I mean, I've heard a lot from Democrats saying that, you know, this all has to get laid at the feet of Dean Skelos. That, you know, that the Senate Majority Leader is stopping early voting, same-day registration, all these things. But I've heard so many Latino legislators in particular, and non-Latino legislators here at SOMOS, banging the drum, DREAM Act, DREAM Act, DREAM Act. We know what you're saying about how this can be so empowering for Democrats, can be so empowering for Latinos to come out and vote en masse. Shouldn't that be the message that you come out all singing as one voice from this conference, that, you know what, voter registration, voter participation, that's our takeaway. And you know what, if we came out and we voted 1 million more strong, then DREAM Act would be right there, you know? And so I hear that the DREAM Act has to be this benchmark that shows that we can accomplish something. How about you bring 100,000 more people to the polls, 1 million more people to the polls, then you'll accomplish your entire agenda.
Or 2 million more people to the polls.
That's right.
Listen, I've been an organizer. I don't think that being a community organizer is a dirty word, right? Some of our Republican colleagues do believe it is. I don't. I want more people to participate. I believe that if we have, when I met people the first 6 months in office, I was constantly had the look. They gave me the look, the up and down, like, oh, you're one of them politicians. A response that I always gave, and I'm not. I'm a public servant, and I'm going to prove it to you through my actions. And I told those people, particularly the ones that were very, very reticent to even trust me, I looked them dead in the face and I said, I don't expect you to trust me, I expect you to hold me accountable. And the best way to hold people accountable is to have more people participating. I've always believed this. We need to change things and the state level as far as laws, rules, regulations, et cetera, to make it more accessible for people to vote. And I can tell you that I've always advocated that from the point that I was, before I was a candidate, when I was a candidate, now that I'm a senator, and I'll continue to advocate for it. And I will continue to argue to my colleagues that it's something that we need to do.
I mean, Senator, and I don't mean to be cheeky, because what you're saying, I personally agree to. You're preaching to the choir here. But if we've had 1 million vote drop-off in the 4 years that you've been in the Senate, doesn't that mean that you've been a failure in office? If, as an activist, that is your chief concern, is to get people engaged? I mean, how can you say that you've done what you set out to accomplish in office if the results are such, right? I mean, you know, activists have to be agitators to move elected officials. You're an elected official, like, the ball is in your hands now. And why is it that we can't run that to the goal line?
If I look at the micro level, because I have to, I am one of 63 state senators. I'm one of 213 legislators. I'm one of 216 people in the state government, including the governor, state controller, and state attorney general, that make policy for the entire state. In the micro level, at my district, we've actually been able to increase the turnout during the primaries this year, and it's still sad, a sad and low number, but we were able to increase our expectation. Our model said that for the primary we're going to have 8,000 votes come out. 9,000 people did. That's work that we did in our county. That's work that we did in my neighborhoods. So I can tell you that I tell my staff that part of our job is to make sure that more people participate every day. I teach civics classes in my district. I'm a political science professor as well. And I've done them like 5 or 6 times in public libraries. I teach classes on civics, about the Constitution, state and local government. I know that I'm committed to it and I'm putting my money where my mouth is. But again, at a statewide level, we as a conference and as a party need to ask ourselves those questions, because I do believe that it is partly our fault. And I'm not going to call us a failure, because I do believe that there's things that we have been able to accomplish, both me personally, us as a conference, and as a party in the last 4 years. But there are some things that we need to do better. And if we don't ask ourselves really tough questions about how to get more people out as a base thing, then we're not doing our job.
As an exit question before Morgan actually.
I have one more question after you too, Gerson.
No, okay,
So
no,
wrap
you'll
up.
take it out.
And he's the boss, so I guess he gets that last question.
Yeah, it depends on who's talking. But listen, you have the DREAM Act. We've had people here, I'm not sure, you know who they are, who keep thinking, oh, we're going to pass the DREAM Act this year. It's become like a litmus test of way of their accomplishment. You're in the Senate.
Yeah.
You know what happened this year.
Yes, I do.
And given the reset of what we have now in the New York State Legislature, in the Senate, where the house that you sit in, the side of, is it real to even go after the DREAM Act again? I mean, is it reality, or are we wasting our time, dangling that carrot that, oh, we're going to pass it now? Is it?
It is never wasting our time to talk about something that we believe is important.
Is it going to pass?
It's going to be a challenge, and a very, very steep challenge. Very steep challenge. We have to have a conversation about where in the process we can potentially pass it, whether it's included in the budget, which is something that I haven't had a conversation with the governor about. I haven't had a conversation with my conference about, which I'm only speaking for myself. I'm not speaking for my conference, and I follow my leader. So we will figure that out. It's going to be more challenging than it was this year, and certainly more challenging than it would have been had we had a clear majority.
Senator, as you said, as Gerson pointed out, I mean, you came into office by taking out one of the worst actors in the legislature, and there was the sense about fighting corruption, about restoring dignity to the legislature. I have seen State Senator John Sampson circulating around here at the SOMOS conference, newly reelected. Does Senator Sampson have a place in your conference?
It's not a question for me as an individual. This conference is for the conference. The decision was made by the leader that when the indictment happened, that he would no longer be a part of our conference. We all know that everyone is innocent until proven guilty, so we'll let that process play itself out. For the moment, I believe that the decision that was made by the leader to reject him from our conference, and I am not the leader, so that's a decision that she made, and I support it.
But, and I mean, I guess I saw kind of an answer in there, but I also wonder if that's also a cop-out, right? Because
if you were the leader, would you oust him?
He's already out of the conference.
Would you keep him out of the conference?
I would.
Okay.
And that's fair. And I just wanted to say one more thing about that, because I hear from so many of your colleagues in the legislature, oh, woe is us, that we get painted with this broad brush because there's a few bad apples, we're all serving our constituents, we're doing a good job, and everyone thinks that we're a bunch of crooks and liars and thieves because there's some bad actors. But when somebody is under double indictment, right? What I don't hear is the legislature getting together and saying, we got to get this guy out of here. I saw everyone leapt up to throw Hiram Montserrat out of office, but that was the only time I can really recall where everyone spoke as one voice and said, this guy has to go because he is bringing us all down.
Yeah, but he didn't do anything illegal there in the Senate either. It was for something else, which is...
I feel like I don't even want to get into that, but
right.
I want to say isn't that the way that you defend the dignity of the legislature and say it's not about innocent and proven guilty, because it's not your right to be in elected office, it's your privilege to be in elected office. And so it's a different bar. It's not about proving it in the court of law, but that it does affect you. It affects the way that people view you, because that when your colleagues are indicted and then all of a sudden there is this collective silence like, oh, we got to see how the courts play.
What's your
I'm
question?
saying, why is there this tolerance among the members of the legislature that when someone is indicted, when it seems like these things are going wrong, that the guy can defend himself in court, but from a legislative standpoint, we think this person needs to be cast out of our ranks because he is diminishing all of us as legislators. Do you agree with that?
That's something that we need. That's a conversation that we need to have as a collective. It's not, as I said, as I answered Gerson, if I was a leader and I'm not looking to be, we have a great leader in Andrea. She made the decision that he was no longer part of our conference. So he's not. You know, I think that there was some seriousness to the violent charges that were brought against Jair Montserrat, and I was not a legislator then, so there were all sorts of other internal conversations that happened to bring that to bear. You know, but again, this is part of what we need to do to really ask ourselves not only electorally, but what do we need to do inside the Senate. In the last 4 years, particularly the last two, I believe that one of the things that led to this coalition that was unprecedented, that came behind us, was a belief that we can actually govern, that we're not a bunch of crazy people in the Democratic Conference. Now that's valuable. Folks that have been with the Republicans for a very long time came with us because they looked at us and they said, well, not only do they might have a chance to win, but if they do, we actually trust these people to run the state. And these are the folks that big interest that have been with the Republicans before because they're like, they're going to serve our interests of our members better. They're going to serve our interests as an institution better. The coalition that came together is because they believe that us as a conference are doing a better job. In this particular instance, as I said to Gerson, he's not a member of our conference. I don't believe that is going to change. If I was the leader, and I am not, but if I was the leader, I would keep him out of the conference, and it's going to get resolved once there are rules in place. If he is convicted, then he will be immediately cast out.
But by the way, so we're clear, even under the indictment, the people in his district, who are the people who are his boss, would send him back, they voted for him.
They did.
They didn't vote for Malcolm Smith. So I think that in their infinite wisdom or not, they voted Malcolm Smith out of office, but yet they felt that John Sampson deserved his day in court. We'll have to see what the courts do and let the process go through. I'm not defending John Sampson. I understand. I think that everyone, but not everybody that's accused can be proven guilty. So we'll have to wait that process, and then he'll have to face the ultimate justice that will and the sentencing if he's found guilty. But the people determined they trust him well enough. They may have been wrong. I happen to think they're wrong. I happen to think they were right with Malcolm Smith. So he's no longer. You don't have to deal with him. So we'll see what happens.
Oh, this was a fascinating interview.
We should do this next time at a bar with a couple of beers.
Yeah.
Oh boy,
not with just tea.
State Senator Gustavo Rivera, thank you for joining us in the Thunderdome here at SOMOS
3 men
2014.
enter, 3 men leave.
Exactly.
Apparently 3 men leave.
Apparently. It's a pleasure to have you here, and we hope to sit down with you again back in New York.
Anytime soon.